Swaying your hips in a feminine and sensual way while walking and moving is a very popular topic on my channel. And I guess it is because the hips and the hip sway is the epitome of femininity, sensuality, and a feminine body language. Of course, it is also our feminine center, so everything that happens around here will enhance your femininity, and it is simply our feminine power. So that's why I made this video in which I will teach you the complete technique of how to sway your hips like a pro, and at the same time looking naturally while doing it. Because I think that this is the main difficulty when trying to have a feminine and sensual hip sway while walking, etc. You of course don't want to look awkward or artificial or as if you were trying too hard. You want to look natural and attractive and sensual. I will teach you everything that you need to know, from the preparation of body and mind, over the techniques, the actual practice, and also I will give you additional tips with regard to body language, because swaying the hips has to do with your whole body, of course. And I will also show you some funny do's and don'ts, so stay until the end. If you enjoy feminine content and would like to see more videos like that, you would help me a lot if you just subscribed to my channel and click the notification bell. Also, if you just liked this content after you've watched it and you liked it, commented it, because this all helps the YouTube algorithm so that I can make more helpful videos just like this for you. And now let's start right into part number 1, preparation, body and mind. So we will first start with the preparation of the body and then with the mind. Both parts are essential for a feminine hip sway. But the body part is very important because it has actually to do with the movement. So if your hips are not prepared well, you might have difficulties with swaying your hips. In general, it is easier for you and for your hips to sway when you are wearing heels, even though they are not very high. Or if you are not used to heels at all or don't like them, then just use normal shoes, flat shoes like ballerinas, for example. For the more feminine feeling, I chose some heels. And the first thing that we have to do is relaxing our hip area and preparing the hip area to move more freely, because when you sway your hips have to be super flexible and relaxed. And you don't need to be a dancer for that. You can still achieve this flexibility that is necessary for walking and swaying the hips with the exercises that I will show you now. And they are 3. The first, we start with hip circles, and we will do round circles, and then in the number 8. And this is to first of all stretch the area and to relax the hip area. So we do clockwise and counterclockwise circles. I will start with one direction, and I will try to keep my upper body very stable. Do circles, but not like this with the whole body, but only with the hip area. So really try to just stretch the hip area in one direction, and then you can also do it in the other one. And just put on some nice music and do it a few times, maybe 10, 20, 30. You can start with a little bit less. And when you have done this round circles, you can try to paint a number 8, and then you try to follow this number 8 with the middle point of your hip, so where your belly button is. Imagine there is something hanging down like a weight, and you then try to follow this line of the number 8. You can also do that in both directions, so just experiment a little. The thing here is to simply warm up the joints, your lower back, and of course your hip area. And do as much as is needed, as feels good for you. So the exercise number 2 is a bit more advanced, and I call it the hip kicks. So what we will do here is we will now play and practice the height of the hip. So if you stand just like this with the weight distributed equally on both sides of your legs and both hips, your hips are on the same height unless you have one longer leg than the other one. And then now it's very important that you go down into your knees so that you flex your knees. From this neutral position, we will kick one side up and then the other side will go down. There are a lot of ways how to do those kicks, like a bit more aggressive, but you can also do them very softly. So you go down into your knees each time you kick one hip up. So for our purpose, for the hip sway, I would recommend you to do this exercise with the soft movement. So not this hard belly dance kick, but the soft kick. So it's really as if you were kind of walking on a stepper, but the movement happens really in the hip area and your feet are not moving at all. They are firmly on the ground. I go down into my knees, but the knees are all the time flexed. So they are never stretched when we are doing this. And you try to do as big movements as possible. Try to pull one hip up as much as possible and then also release it. The third exercise, that is something that has to do with pulling up and releasing, and I have shown this exercise in a very old video of mine already. It is very, very effective for becoming more sensual in your hip area, for relaxing your hips, and it's called the hip drop. So what we will do is we will put the weight on one side. So here I am putting my weight on my left leg. The other leg is practically free. So I imagine that I have like a string here attached to my hip, the one that is free, and then I pull up the string like this so that the hip also pulls up, and you try to again do it as much as possible. So if you only come until here, it's okay. Try to do it as high as possible and then release it. So the whole leg must be relaxed for this. What your foot is doing doesn't matter, just let it go. You have to concentrate on the hip. So up and release, up and release, up and release. And you do the same with the other side, up and release, up and release. And you don't have to do this with high heels. I'm just wearing the heels for the video, but for the exercises you can do them without heels. And now that we have these exercises, and then we can start to practice. But first of all, how to prepare your mind. So now comes the second part of the preparation. You might wonder why I included this part in physical activity like the hip sway. I think that your mind is as important as your body when it comes to moving. Why? Because if you are not in the right state of mind and if you don't feel very feminine, you will be blocked and you will be blocking the movement in this feminine area in the center. So it's not only about having relaxed hips and being flexible and just released here, but it also has to do with feeling feminine. So you have to do some things that will put you in the right feminine energy state. And the first thing that I would recommend you is, when you go outside and want to practice just in your real life, do it after you did some kind of receiving activity. But do it after you did something creative, after you listened to music, after you went shopping, after you went to a cafe and had a nice coffee or tea, after you indulged in a nice meal, or after you had a dance class, for example. You will be in a totally different mind, and this will also show in your hip swing. The other thing is, you can put yourself in this feminine energy or in this feeling by clothing, for example. If you want to especially practice the hip sway, it helps to wear swinging skirts. It really helps because those skirts, I mean skirts that are a little bit more, maybe they can be tight here, but then they are looser when they get longer, and of very sheer materials or very swinging materials. This really helps with your hip sway because every time you will sway, this skirt will sway with you, and this sway will be exaggerated a little bit by your skirt or by the sway of the skirt. So you can play with that much more. It's playful. Or wear something else that you really like, that makes you feel feminine and kind of sexy. If you like, wear some natural makeup, wear something that makes you feel sexy and feminine, and wear your hair open. If you like that, if you have long hair, it helps with the hip sway, because when you're swaying your hips, walking, and when you are turning, then your hair will swing with you. And with regard to the shoes, I already told you, if you can, for the practice, try to wear some kind of heel. It doesn't have to be a high heel as I am wearing here, but it can also be a kitten heel, just some shoe that makes you automatically walk a bit more feminine, because it makes you feel more feminine. So these are the preparations for your mind. And now we will go on with the actual technique and the practice. So this will be the most important part of the video. Watch it first, and later on when you want to practice you can re-watch it. But first you have to pay attention, because I will explain the technique of the perfect, naturally looking hip sway. So with the unlocked hips, we are going to release one hip at a time every time we step on the side where the hip is. And there are three things that I mean that you have to do. So what I mean is, every time when we take a step forward like this, we will fall into the hip. And I'm doing it very slowly and strongly now for the practice. Let's say you step on the right foot and you go forward with your right foot like this. The second we step on and we transfer our weight on this foot, because of course when we walk we have to transfer the weight, we also release the hip by unlocking it. So basically the hip goes up. Because we unlock it, we release it. It goes up naturally. It goes up because, not because we are pulling it up or because we are kicking it up. This is not the case. It goes up because we step on the foot and we transfer our weight, and by transferring our weight, the hip releases. And here is also a big difference to the exercises. Exercises were just for relaxing the hip area and making it more flexible. Here we will have our knees straight. So every time we step forward, our knee is straight, and in the moment of transferring the weight, our hip releases. The other one is not involved now, it's just following. It's always the side where you step on. So just imagine falling into the hip and releasing into the hip, step into the hip, something like that every time you step on it, every time you transfer your weight. And of course when you walk this goes much faster and more automatically, but here for the technique, for the practice, we will do it very slowly. So again, I step and release, I release, release and release. And now this looks still a little bit unnatural, but this is because we are practicing and I'm doing it to the maximum. So I'm releasing until I reach the maximum part. So when I will be walking, because of the speed of the walk, I won't have time to totally release. But sometimes you see, especially women who are trying to walk very sensually or are maybe walking like that, for example Marilyn Monroe, you will see that they are actually using the whole range of their hip movement. So they are really releasing and falling into the hip until it's no more possible, and that's why they have such a extreme hip sway, this kind of femme fatale hip sway. But according to my walking style, this is not necessary, or I'm not doing it. And for me it's also a little bit too exaggerated, especially in daily life or social situations. So I will not use the whole range of motion, but we will do it just for the practice. Later on, when you're walking faster, you will just release a little bit less. But you will already know how to do it, and this is what the practice is about. In the beginning, we will practice at home. and practice with a mirror. Also, make a video of yourself. So record yourself after you have practiced or while practicing, because you have to see how you are moving, or if you are doing it, how you look. If you look good or if you look exaggerated, if you look too stiff. It is very helpful to analyze yourself. And as I said, practice in the beginning by walking in a much slower pace than you would walk on the street. And then when you're outside, you simply adapt your personal walking style. So if you have the model-like walking style, if you have long legs, you will walk in a much faster pace. You will make bigger steps, and then your hips will also move a little bit differently. They will kick more. I actually made a video about the model-like walking style. I will link that here so that you can watch it. And also, if you haven't seen my video about the feminine walking styles, the 4, don't know your walking style, then I recommend you to do the quiz. So in the end, you will of course walk like you walk according to your style, but once your hips are released, once you know how to get the maximum out of your hips in practice at home, you can then, you can do it more consciously, and you can actually decide how much you want to sway your hips. And this is what you will achieve after you have practiced all those steps. And of course, for some of you, it may take more time. For some, it will be easier. These are really things that you can learn, and I tried to explain it to you in the easiest way I could for a YouTube video, and I hope that it will help you. Now let's go on to part number 3, which is as important as part number 1 and number 2, the body language, because your hips might have their own mind, but they are connected to your whole body and to your face. And if there is something wrong in the other parts of your body, the hip sway will not work. Your hips sway is of course very nice, but if your body and your face does not cooperate, it won't have the same effect. And it might even block you. So we will start with the face. Imagine you are walking and you have a bad or an unpleasant expression in your face. I don't think that you will appear very femininely. Actually, it will look very weird, because how can you have this feminine and sensual movement in your body and move really femininely and then have a very harsh or negative facial expression? So always maintain a pleasant facial expression. I actually made a video quite a long time ago about facial expressions to avoid. I will link that down below so that you can watch it. Also, when you walk past someone and see someone that you like, smile. You can just smile very gently, but this will also emphasize your feminine and very sympathetic, pleasing, charismatic appearance. Now the arms. So of course, when you're walking, your arms are also moving. It is very important that when you focus on your hips and you have this very nice hip sway, that your arms swing naturally with you. That means that they shouldn't be stiff or swing in an uncontrolled way. They should simply swing while you sway. So while your hips are swaying, your arms are swinging. And pay attention to them if you see on the video that you made of you, or if someone tells you that your arms are kind of moving in an awkward way. And that could be that they are too stiff, or that they are swinging in a too excessive or uncontrolled way. And the next area is our upper body. So of course, if you have seen my other posture videos, you will know that I'm always preaching to have a good posture, an upright posture. And of course, the same applies to when swinging your hips. You should of course don't walk around or swing your hips with a slouched back. This won't help you at all. So always elevate your upper body and your head as if you were pulled up on an imaginary string, and pull your shoulders back and release them. And then your body will naturally look very elegant. And when you then swing your hips, then everything will look just super attractive and super feminine. And the last part of your body are your knees and your feet. And I have to tell you something, because I think this is a part, or these are two parts that are quite difficult for many of you, because I got a lot of questions with regards to what are the knees doing. So actually, when you are walking and when you are swaying your hips, because this is of course about the hips here, your knees are not really doing something consciously. So knees should not be too straight nor too flexed. They are actually sometimes flexed and sometimes straight. And for example, when you are walking, they are moving constantly, but you are not consciously paying attention to how they are moving. Because when you start thinking about your knees, you will get totally confused. Just concentrate on what your hips are doing, and the rest of your body is just helping. The knee on the side where the hip is like extending, where it's releasing, is straight. This is just a natural movement when you transfer weight, but then it becomes flexed again. And this is just something that happens constantly, and it's in motion, so it's in a flow. It's a movement that is constantly flowing and that I cannot really isolate from the whole movement. That's why my tip would be just walk naturally and concentrate, focus on what your hips are doing. And with regard to the feet, try to keep them straight, so don't walk outside or inside. They have to be in the same direction as your knees. Roll them from the heel to the toe. And now I will show you some do's and don'ts. And after that, I hope I will see you in my next videos. For now, thank you for watching and bye bye!